sure every Please make sure everyone knows who you are and who they are before you begin. You will have 25 minutes with a 5-minute cushion to describe the legal, financial, and ethical dimensions of the problem and to recommend a solution that passes muster on all 3 counts. During this time, teams will be uninterrupted. When you are finished, the judges will ask you questions for 20 minutes. During the Q&A, both you and judges stay in character. After the Q&A, the judges will give you feedback outside the role playing. Some important things to keep in mind. The ethical aspects of your analysis are the most important part. However, these should be described in a simple, practical, common sense fashion. Using technical, philosophical terminology or basing your argument on religious or theological grounds will be considered a serious weakness. During this presentation, every member of the team must have some sort of speaking role. All right. With that being said, you all can go ahead and begin. If you want to first begin by telling us what your role is and what our role is, and then you can take it away.
Perfect. Good morning. My name is Sarah, and I'm here with my consulting team, AID, AI Decision-Making Ethics. And we are here to help you, members of the board of directors at OpenAI. Our team hopes to mitigate the risk of national legislation concerning generative AI and guide you toward the profitable, responsible, and ethical advance of your company's large language models and generative software. In this presentation, we will lay out the ethical issues and public anxieties surrounding your AI projects and recommend actionable steps to address these concerns. We will begin with an overview of your company, AI, and the reasons why it's been such a hot topic in the news lately. We will then discuss business and finance, legal logistics, and ethical issues. Finally, we will close with a review of the recommendations AID offers before opening the floor for discussion. As members of the board on OpenAI, I'm sure you know everything there is to know about this revolutionary technology, but refreshers never hurt, so let's explore. What exactly is artificial intelligence? AI is the development of computer systems to perform work that normally requires human intelligence. Machines learn from vast data inputs, recognize patterns, gain experience, grow from new inputs, and complete creative tasks. Some examples of common AI that we use in our everyday life include your smartphone's face lock ID, personalized ads on TV, travel aids like Google Maps, self-driving cars, and smart assistants like Siri and Alexa. AI has many impressive abilities like natural language processing, speech recognition, and machine vision. Generative AI refers to a subset of AI that uses machine learning models, which have processed large amounts of data, the input layer, to generate novel data through pattern recognition and informed prediction, the output layer. It has a wide variety of applications, including creating human-like conversations, realistic images, and even music. For example, ChatGPT stands for Chat Generative Pre-trained Transformer, released in November of last year. The chat's most original 3.5 model was trained on 570 gigabytes of textual data scraped from the internet, including books, articles, websites, and even social media. So pre-trained refers to the model being already exposed to hundreds of billions of words. You at OpenAI have committed to 4 goals on your public charter: broadly distributed benefits, long-term safety, technical leadership, and cooperative orientation. I will return to these and elaborate on them later because your values as a company should be central in all your work and are vital to properly orient your goals, keeping in mind that OpenAI's mission statement promises to benefit not just a select few, but all of humanity. OpenAI faces several critical ethical problems inherent to its large language models and gen software, including public accessibility, content control, propaganda, and social bias, impact on the free market, human creativity and ownership, and lastly, human safety and security. These are some news headlines only in the past 24 hours concerning your company. As you can see, the water's starting to boil, the pressure's on, and all eyes are on you, OpenAI. Data protection, misinformation created by AI hallucinations, and international privacy laws are only some of the many concerns the media is starting to catch on to. Now, my colleague Riley will describe the current state of OpenAI from the business perspective.
Thank you, Sarah. With any new technology, the development usually comes in the form of a sigmoid curve, an S-curve. At the beginning of the technology's development, the improvements are slow. At some point, the technology grows and booms, then eventually comes to a slowing point at its maturity and decline. With AI in general, we're not sure exactly where we are on the S-curve. AI has been around for some time, but only now has begun to rapidly improve. So we would suggest that we are in the beginning phase of the growth phase. To keep up with competition, AI companies, including OpenAI, release their more and more advanced models to the public, and even you recognize how this can be dangerous. In the rapidly growing market, these are 5 of your competitors. Meta's Cicero is the first AI to play at a human level in diplomacy. Google's Lambda is a conversational large language model used to power dialogue-based applications that can generate natural-sounding human language. Wide Narrow is used for market analysis and helps companies make business decisions. Flume is intended to loosen big tech's grip on large models. And Jasper is supposed to be easy and used to generate ideas, revise content, and even make you laugh. OpenAI is intended for the general public as opposed to Cicero that targets people in customer service, and Wide Narrow that helps target companies. Like other generative software, OpenAI's ChatGPT aims to imitate human language. OpenAI strives to walk the line between a high-quality, complex program and an easy-to-use general program. You do strike the right balance and are viewed positively by the public. When ChatGPT was released, people were eager to test its limits and were generally not disappointed. The chat set a record as the fastest app to reach 100 million active users, reaching the milestone in just 2 months. So congratulations on that achievement. The success caught the attention of the well-known technology company, Microsoft, which led to its billion-dollar investment into OpenAI in 2019 and again in 2021. Especially with Microsoft support, your company does well financially. As you know, the model used is quite advanced, is estimated to cost $3 million a month to run it. Your company has the deal that Microsoft gets preferential rates or free access to Microsoft Azure's cloud servers in exchange for Microsoft's $10 billion investment. OpenAI makes money through licensing its products and services, subscriptions, partnerships and collaborations, and investments. You project that ChatGPT will make $200 million this year and $1 billion in 2024. The company was most recently valued at $29 billion after the $10 billion funding round by Microsoft. All very impressive numbers that make us excited to work with you. Now my colleague Anthony will explain some of the legal logistics.
Thank you, Riley. OpenAI is officially listed as a nonprofit organization with the intention to ensure that artificial intelligence benefits all of humanity. However, many legal problems arise when it comes to their for-profit subsidiary, which is OpenAI Limited Partnership, which plans to sell images from DALL-E and expand with the business model of ChatGPT. Microsoft, as my colleague Riley mentioned, is one of the first tech giants to invest in OpenAI, as they plan to use the new language models in Microsoft Word, PowerPoint, and Bing, which could lead to unprecedented amounts of internet piracy. ChatGPT has been in the spotlight recently because of the tempting opportunity it creates for students to be academically dishonest. The bigger the problem is, it poses a threat to authors who run the risk of their content being stolen and used in papers, which they will never get credit for. There is a lawsuit that has been filed against OpenAI in a San Francisco federal court, where the plaintiff claims that it is already creating vast internet piracy. Is there any risk in this lawsuit? Right now, no, because the plaintiff's claims are mostly based on the hypothetical theft of intellectual property. And since it is only hypothetical, it is not a crime. Remember, what goes on between an input layer and the output layer is hidden. So it's extremely difficult to trace AI creation back to the original data from which the software is learned. Microsoft and OpenAI have been working together on the defense of this case because Microsoft has a lot invested into OpenAI. And both corporations claim that no internet piracy has occurred under their partnership and are asking for the case to be thrown out of the court. However, if OpenAI releases their newer models of ChatGPT and DALL-E, they do run the risk of lawsuits for a multitude of crimes. Art forgery, internet piracy, and criminal copyright infringement are examples of such crimes that could lead to millions of dollars in fines and even prison time. And it's not just about maximizing profits and seeing how much we can do to get away without being penalized. Remember, legal codes themselves are based off of ethical issues. OpenAI's legal policies should reflect the company's ethical values. And now I welcome Sarah to remind us of these.
Thank you, Anthony. Before we take a deep dive into the ethical questions arising from our research, we'd like once again to refer to your values and principles promoted by the OpenAI's charter. First, we have broadly distributed benefits, which promotes the welfare of humanity and discourages a monopoly of power. Second, we have long-term safety, which refers to preventing a competitive AI race to the bottom and promises to assist other companies if their success in a project is gauged to be more likely than your own. Third, we have technical leadership, owning to your goal of being the best of the best. And lastly, we have cooperative orientation, which aims at facilitating an environment of international AI research collaboration. With these ideas and company ideals in mind, I'd like to introduce Thomas, who will start to unpack the significant ethical problems you are dealing with now.
Thank you, Sarah. From our research, there are 5 main areas in which we have identified ethical issues that the company might face. The first being public accessibility, second, content control, propaganda, and social biases, impact on the free market and jobs, human creativity and ownership, and also, finally, human safety and security. We believe that these problems are problems that OpenAI will face based on the very nature of the issues and how they relate to generative AI as it exists. So first, with public accessibility, because some of the language models that OpenAI has are public release, there has to be some restrictions as to what can go in and go out. And OpenAI has done a great job so far as to creating these restrictions. However, there are some ways that people have found ways to circumvent the regulations. So with ChatGPT, you can't generally input prompts that have to do with controversial topics, such as Holocaust denial or certain political candidates. But people have found creative ways to get around these by writing the prompts in certain ways that basically trick the AI into allowing them to create these, to get the content that they want. So OpenAI is working very well currently at mitigating these issues, and we commend them for that. We find this to basically be a non-issue because OpenAI has the rights to, as a private company, to create the policies that they have. They could even delete the policies, but that would be terrible from a PR standpoint to allow whoever to create whatever kind of content they want. So next I'll move on to content control and propaganda. On a broader perspective, there are some issues that OpenAI itself that you guys reference. Some of your researchers in a paper have they speak on mitigation of widespread misuse of AI technology. One of these possibilities is the use of AI to create new propaganda. Other issues might be creating algorithms for scammers to use, targeting specific audiences that they know might be more susceptible. Again, this is pretty much a non-issue for OpenAI because the technology is out there. Other companies are already using it and are more open source about it. So scammers and propagandists are likely to use other technologies, even if OpenAI places new restrictions and finds new ways to mitigate these issues. So next, I'll talk about social bias. Because generative AI works off of human content, it tends to draw human prejudices and biases into the content that it produces. So an early example of this, in 2015, Amazon had a hiring bot that it used, it was using it to basically filter out the best candidates. And after about a year of use, Amazon found that it was filtering out women automatically. The AI had basically taught itself that women were less preferable candidates. And there might have been certain things, the discrepancy between the amount of male jobs versus female jobs in Amazon in general might have been one of those factors that led it to do that. But there's other possibilities. This is generally referred to as a kind of a ghost in the machine. It's an anomaly that appears, which is completely unexpected. OpenAI has done a great job of preventing certain ghosts in the machine or eliminating them after they have appeared. But I harken back to the people who have circumvented some of the regulations. They've been able to find that there are some biases that do come out if you circumvent the regulations. So I recently saw on Twitter, someone found a way to get OpenAI to rank the price of human organs based off of the races that they came from. So they couldn't directly input it into ChatGPT, but they found a creative way of doing it by asking it to build a table so that the primary function was to build a table. Meanwhile, the content of the table was a secondary function that ChatGPT ignored. But the content of the table basically ranked white people's organs higher than minority organs, which is a very strange example, but it points out some biases. And there are other examples that the Twitter user pointed out. So even if ChatGPT can regulate generally what goes in, sometimes people can circumvent it and problematic things can come out. But OpenAI has done a great job so far of preventing this from happening, and they're working. You are working on it as we speak. So as long as you continue to work on it, we don't see this to be that great of an issue. Now I move on to the economic impact. With any new technology, there's always going to be concerns about how it will impact the economy. With advances in robotics, people always thought robots are going to steal my job. With AI in general, this is a new concern. OpenAI, your researchers recently released a study that said that AI will likely impact 80% of the workforce in the future. 80% is a large number, but that 80% varies greatly in severity. So only very few professions had 100% exposure to AI impact. And that would be stuff like data analysis or data input, whereas other professions were impacted much less severely. So in a free market economy, we don't see this to be specifically an issue for OpenAI. However, it does have some, it does have great public notice. So there's likely to be governmental intervention in some way, some regulation based off of the economic impact and ways of mitigating or slowly introducing AI into the economy so that it doesn't have an instant, so it doesn't instantly turn the tables. And now I would like to turn to Jacob, who will wrap up our discussion of the ethical issues you face, and then pose some of our recommendations for you as we move forward. Oops, sorry.
Wonderful. Thank you, Thomas. Human safety and security. All right. We are well trained to fear rogue AI. From Kubrick's 2001: A Space Odyssey back to when Will Smith was at the top of his game in iRobot, or Avengers: Age of Ultron, which pulled in $1.4 billion. And of course, you cannot forget Skynet, which has become synonymous with general AI turned patricidal in the same way that Kleenex is synonymous with the tissue. The good news is, though, that the type of algorithm you are selling generally is not this. It is not the killer AI. ChatGPT and DALL-E are general AIs, they are narrow AIs, not general AIs, or what you call AGI, artificial general intelligence. But you are working on AGI, and that is of concern, because when you finally do it, when you build the software that can think and can learn and can feel and can approach consciousness, humanity at large is going to have to do a threat assessment, and we are horribly equipped to do that. In fact, only OpenAI at this moment has the resources to perform threat assessments of its own product, which is, I think, such an obvious conflict that it must be addressed, but I'm going to do that shortly. Real quickly, though, I do want to bring up some of the language you use about safety and security. In both the internal and external documents, you talk about values and making sure that AI has human values. I think that it's quite important that you clarify this language for the public and assure us that survival is a human value. All right, so now we have some of our recommendations. Postpone release of new models to guarantee safety. Hire focused study groups to test content rather than immediately releasing them to the public. And rehiring and expanding the Microsoft AI ethics team. I do have a fourth proposal, but I'm going to hold that for dramatic effect. All right, the first, postponing releases until you can guarantee safety. This is something OpenAI has already done. The model of ChatGPT that was released late last year and shook the world was held back several months. So that the model the public got access to was a little bit more refined and a lot less racist. The issues, of course, with this proposal are that it's expensive. Any software that's not released isn't making you money. Our second proposal is somewhat similar to the first. That instead of releasing your software to beta so early, where the world can use it and can make things ranking human organs, you spend a little bit more resources testing things in-house. Given the scale of the market you're tapping into and the rapid growth of the company, the costs of this are relatively minimal compared to the PR benefits. And our next proposal is based on something that happened recently that has concerned everyone. Microsoft let go of its team, which was responsible for overseeing the integration of AI with Microsoft software. And they were an AI ethics team, so making sure it was done ethically. This reduction in ethics capacity at such a critical time for the industry is frightening. And I know you are not Microsoft, but considering how large of a stakeholder Microsoft is in OpenAI, it's something that you need to address with them. And finally, our true recommendation, the big one, requesting a preemptive governmental oversight body. Now, I know that federal oversight is a scary phrase, but I'm going to explain that this isn't just the ethical option, it's the cheap option for you. If regulation is inevitable, which it is, then you ought to make sure it's on your terms. But real quick, I want to address that black box problem that I referenced to earlier in the human safety and security slide. We, the public, the legislators, everyone can see what goes into your software. We can see the inputs we type into the box in ChatGPT. Oftentimes we can see what ChatGPT was trained on, and we can see what it spits out, but we can't see what happens in between. We're like Neolithic man presented with a microwave. Cold food goes in, hot food comes out. What the hell happens in the middle? Nobody knows. So this is a problem because lack of knowledge is scary. Nobody knows how AI works, and the fear of it may well cause its destruction. Look at Italy, which has already banned ChatGPT. At the current level of public hysteria, a similar ban as Italy's in the United States is possible, and regulation is inevitable. So calling for an oversight body, like Mark Zuckerberg did for Facebook and data privacy, is a necessary preventative measure. It is only through public and legislative understanding about what you are selling that there can be any assurance that it's safe and ethical. You ought to be shouting from the rooftops, look at us, scrutinize us, and you'll see what we're doing is good for everybody. The formation of a regulatory body, either through the Department of Commerce or some other government agency, is inevitable. So why not try to influence it? Influence the legislation and be in the room where it's being crafted rather than pouting outside of it. Because if you don't, one of your competitors is going to, and they're going to craft regulations that impact you harmfully. So if the choice is between some constraints, which are inevitable, or the potential for oblivion, which is possible, then the choice is clear. Take the constraints. Besides, there is no upfront cost to this. It does not privilege your competitors. And if it shrinks the AI market space, it'll do so for everyone, and future developments. What you already have created can be protected, and it's already lucrative. Besides, more transparency is more ethical than less, and your mission is to, and I quote, ensure that artificial general intelligence benefits all of humanity. Federal oversight is the best way to do this, and it might just prevent an overbroad and reactionary ban of your business model. So to recap, the cheapest, most effective, and most ethical solution to the ethical problems presented by generative AI and general AI is for you to lead the pack and decisively call for federal regulation. This will ensure legality, accessibility, and safety. Thank you.
And thank you for your attention. We hope our recommendations resonate with you as members of the board at OpenAI and responsible for OpenAI's bright future. And the future of generative AI is certainly a bright one. This very image was created with a simple prompt, a self-portrait of AI walking into a new age of discovery. We would now like to welcome questions and enter into our discussion phase.
Excellent. Our thanks to you all over at AIDE for that presentation. You've given this board a lot to think about. You were able to encapsulate a wide range of legal, financial, and ethical issues for us to digest in a very short period of time, which is what we wanted. So we very much appreciate that. I know the board has some questions for you, and we'd appreciate your insight on them. I'll start off with a couple, and then I'll pass things off to my colleagues here. One of the things that you spoke about was the idea of ensuring that these generative AI platforms have the right kind of guardrails, that these platforms don't, for example, tell people how to make bombs, or they don't tell people how to commit crimes, or don't advise on things that we can all agree are just abhorrent behaviors that we don't want to encourage. And so we can all assume without deciding that we want to have some kind of guardrails. But I think we have to get to the other question that we'd love your thought on, which is, how do we figure out where those guardrails are? We might all be able to agree that we don't want ChatGPT telling people how to make a bomb, but there are certainly some less controversial topics where reasonable minds could disagree about whether or not AI should be able to advise on those particular things. And I'm curious, how should our organization go about establishing those guardrails? Is that something that we should adopt internally? If so, what does that decision-making process look like? How collaborative is it? Do we bring in a diverse perspectives? Is it something where we get outside help? Is this something where we get the government assistance? Is this something where we have a unaffiliated third party help us? Would appreciate you, or should it be completely democratic? Should we be letting the people as a whole decide? Would appreciate your thoughts on that, because it's a big issue for us.
Absolutely. When we first started our research, one of the major concerns we had was actually that OpenAI would censor your material too much, and it wouldn't provide for that a diversity of opinions and just the wide variety of thought processes that are out there. However, there's certainly a line between things we can argue about and certain things, as Thomas mentioned, social biases that are just not acceptable. And so that for you as a private company, you have to draw the line, but also always keeping in mind that whatever you decide will be partially reviewed by the public. So it might be very wise, as you mentioned, to bring in, and as we recommend too, teams to test your product in a safe environment and give you feedback, and have diverse members from many different backgrounds give you feedback on where exactly you should draw the line in the sand.
And real quickly, if I might add, there is a question about where the onus lies here. And if someone asks Open or ChatGPT to tell them a joke about a dumb blonde, and ChatGPT tells them a joke about a dumb blonde, I would argue, and I think most of us can accept, that it's the person who asked for that joke who is at fault for any moral abhorrence there. But so while there should obviously be safeguards at the extremes, I think that so long as ChatGPT isn't telling the dumb blonde joke when you ask them to write a business email, it is of less concern that there be ultra strict screening processes.
Well, one of your proposals that you gave us, I believe it was actually your first proposal for our organization, was to postpone the new release of any new models. And because I guess the idea being that we want to, take some time and work out the kinks before we bring out the next version of this. But one of the things I'm having trouble reconciling, I'd love your thoughts on this, is sort of baked into the model of our organization is one of the ways that we work out the kinks in our next model is by releasing it to the public. The beta process of getting feedback, of seeing what the marketplace does with the model, and then allowing us to iterate and make changes based on that is sort of a central basis for how we roll out platforms. If you're asking us to not release things, to do more things behind the scenes before we put them out there, how can we be assured that we're still going to be able to put out the most effective and ethically sound product?
Sure. So there's really two parts to this. The first is that the product you're putting out, you took enough time to make sure it's safe, which is a minimum threshold that I don't think you're questioning. But the second is whether your product is polished. And well, we did recommend delaying to polish, essentially. The cost, or how much of a cost you're willing to bear for that, is up to OpenAI. Whether it's worth taking that time to make sure there aren't bad headlines about you is up to you. So while I think I think that there are certainly benefits to having an AI that doesn't spit out horrible or misguided or completely false things from a PR perspective. If that's the weight you're willing to bear to get your product tested, then all the power to you.
All right, one last question before I bring in my colleagues here to continue the Q&A. Another one of your proposals centered around being assertive about insisting that the government create some kind of oversight body for us. And perhaps you are correct that that sort of oversight is inevitable, but is it something that we should actively encourage? I'm not saying that our own internal processes for ensuring the most ethically sound AI platform is perfect. I might be skeptical, though, as to suggest that the government might be better suited, a government that is subjected to political pressures, that is subjected to the whims of whatever administration is running the country at any particular time. You might have one administration that is very supportive of AI, another one that just wants to see it destroyed, and that sort of oversight could just end our company as we know it. And so in that regard, should we necessarily be actively encouraging the creation of a governmental body that could be susceptible to political pressures and ultimately could bring those pressures to bear on our organization?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly can empathize with that view and those fears, but in the end, it's not. It isn't a question of if, but when. And the only way to stop that partisan process, or not the only way, but the best way to stop a completely partisan regulatory body is to write that in its foundation. I think that Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer has already announced that his office is in the process of writing AI regulation software. And so if you want to write into whatever the regulatory body's constitution that it is nonpartisan, that it hears and respects industry voices, it has to be you saying that, because there is no one on Capitol Hill who's going to be defending you unless you do it yourself.
Right. And to add to that, Jacob, this wave is coming and it's already here in Europe. Italy has put a temporary ban on your company, and the EU is looking seriously into just outright banning you in general. So this is here. America is right behind. This will happen. So it's really just a question of whether you're going to be in the room when it does.
And also to add to that, from a public relations standpoint, it does look good to the public to be a part of the change in protecting humanity, since that is one of your core values in your business model. So not only is it wise financially and is it inevitable, it looks good to the public to also be on the side that's protecting humanity.
Understood. Svetlana, you have some questions for the group? Svetlana? Oh, there we go.
My question is mostly around the regulatory body. To your point, just like lots of technology was previously put in social media and there was no regulation, and I think overall governments took a note to that, saying what happened with Facebook and Google and just overall privacy laws. It just seems that taking the
I think we're having a little bit of trouble hearing you, I think. Oh, now we can't hear you at all.
Yeah.
If it would help, we could move on to another question. If she could type the question so we can address it momentarily, because we really could not hear much of that.
nobody can hear.
Okay, we can hear you now, Sveti, but be a little louder.
Sure, I was talking about regulatory bodies taking a long time to process such regulations, that even though perhaps it could be even argued that Italy put the ban because it's still taking too long to come up with the proper solution and the proper regulation around AI. So I wonder what the argument in timeline is around the delayed release and kind of waiting on the regulatory bodies to impede such regulations into using the product.
Yeah, so that's a great question. We do feel that there is a ticking clock with AI regulations, and it's pretty generally understood that that clock is ticking down to whoever makes the first general AI or AGI, that conscious thing that could pose a threat. But that's part of the issue here, and I'm sorry we don't have a solution for you, but it is only OpenAI and the other companies working on AI that understand that timeline. We, the consultants, do not have access to that level of data and internal progression, and neither does legislature. So while I would say that a regulatory body or oversight should be created as soon as possible, I couldn't tell you how soon as possible really is.
Right, and adding to that, you have held back your products before in the past. In 2016, you delayed your release of your Chat GPT. So, and you're doing great right now. Your profits are amazing. So it's really, as Jacob said, up to the company discretion. And there's been a lot of talk about halting the next version of the Chat GPT-4 for quite a while, because this would be a much more advanced tool and has the capability to be used dangerously. So it's about risk assessment. It's about seeing how long you can hold off profits while making sure you still get the bang for your buck. But I don't think a delay, if it's for such a good reason as making sure your products are safe for the public, is going to ultimately hurt you in the long run.
I just have one more question around working with others. As you know, Elon Musk heading along with many AI data scientists put up a letter asking for the overall delay onto this, so that I guess humanity no pain, science can catch up of what is required after the release of ChatGPT. And the question around it, if we were to decide to delay in some way, do you have a thought or a recommendation of how long would it be? Would it be 6 months, or are we talking years? And of course, in regards to our profit, years will not be profitable. But what would be a good timeline if we decide to delay in order to work with others into releasing the best product? Yeah.
I am so sorry to give you the same answer once again, but this is the black box that we talked about. The timeline for safety is only knowable by you at this moment. It is only knowable by OpenAI, and while I think it was a 3-month delay for the last model of ChatGPT was appropriate, I don't know if it is a 6-month or a 3-year. It depends entirely upon how advanced the new model is, and B, how much of a threat it poses. So again, I think that this line of questioning sort of reinforces the point that someone needs to know the answer to these questions.
I also think a possible factor that might be included in addition to the ones that Jacob mentioned, is just governmental pressure or even public pressure in general, to withhold the release. Because if there's any threat of the government saying, if you release this, we will shut it down, we will have it banned. If there's any threat of that, then it is clearly well within the company's interests to withhold the release.
Yeah, so be responsive. You'll see senators and legislatures putting out statements, and your own legal and lobbying teams should be able to keep a pretty general pulse on the risk of a ban and what you can be releasing at the moment. Thank you.
How much time do we have left? Or is that something I should have been keeping track of?
I'm sorry, I don't know.
Well, no, that was a question for either Savav or Peter.
We have half an hour, 30 minutes.
We're at 40 minutes, you said?
We have 30 minutes left.
We have 40 minutes left, but I believe
30.
that
30.
30
30.
minutes. Understood, but I know it's 25 minutes for the 20 to 25 for the presentation, then 20 minutes for the Q&A. So I don't know how much of the 20 minutes we've exhausted there.
Around 15 minutes of it, I believe.
Okay. So now we can sprinkle in at least a couple more questions then. You have spoken a few times in this presentation around the idea that there are other players in this space. We do have effectively competitors, and that you even have spoken about how whether or not we do certain things or don't do certain things, our competitors may do those things anyway. And so how much does it buy us as an organization to adopt many of your recommendations, many of which involve slowing down, stopping, competing with an arm tied behind our back in terms of the progress of our organization, when we know that there are other competitors who may not be as bound to those same constructs as we are going to be? Are we putting ourselves at a competitive disadvantage needlessly by, say, delaying the release of our next product when our competitors may not do that, or trying to hamstring the innovation of our platform with governmental oversight when other organizations may not be as willing to subject themselves to that oversight? How do we balance as an organization being as innovative as we can and being competitive with adopting some of these limits that you're proposing?
So OpenAI you do have a large share of the market, especially among the public, because you are catered towards the general population while having a well-developed product. But also, as Sarah had mentioned before, in the long run, it will benefit you to move ahead cautiously because we're not fully aware of the negative externalities that may arise. And it looks better in the public eye for you to take those steps towards protecting society at large. Whereas even if your competitors plow ahead and disregard any warnings or hazards, their company will suffer those consequences sooner if you are cautious moving forward.
Also, another key factor in your charter is you've referred to cooperative orientation and long-term safety. And in long-term safety, you actually promise to help your competitors and other AI research firms if their chance of success is more likely than yours. And this is determined on a case-by-case basis, but the basic thought triggering condition would be a better than even chance in the next 2 years. So already you have promised to help the AI competition as in general, the whole market. And also in your charter, you have said your primary fiduciary responsibility is to humanity. So really you have to ask yourself, what's more important, profitability or safety?
Understood. One more question. with the time we have left here. As you all know, before I became the chair of the board of this organization, I was an intellectual property lawyer. And so I want to put that hat on for a second and talk to the legal representative of your group and see if you have any further insights for us on the intellectual property law implications of this software. Just this past Saturday, I was reading about how a producer was able to create a Drake and the Weeknd song that sounds just like a Drake and the Weeknd song, but it actually didn't come from those artists. It was created entirely by an AI sound alike that got 20 million streams and before it was shut down by the streaming services. And that's just the latest example of how these AI platforms like ours seem to be being used with impunity to flout a wide range of potential copyright law, trademark laws, right of publicity laws. Can you give us any insight as to what you think of some of these cases that are emerging and what responsibilities our company has from a legal standpoint to make sure we're on the right side of these intellectual property laws?
Yeah, for sure. The first thing that comes to mind out of the crimes that I've looked at in California and at the federal level is criminal copyright infringement. I don't know if OpenAI would be specifically liable for a Drake and the Weeknd not a remix. It would just be copying their voices and like songs in general. I think again that would be something that it would be smart to delay releases because of that. I know in my speech I talked about how your DALL-E expansion, you're trying to sell images with AI authorship, which in the United States, a image needs a human author to be copyrighted. So of course, any artist who is alive and still painting has copyright over their images, and if it's used or if it's copied, then the person will be prosecuted for copyright art forgery. When it comes to using AI voices, like I know many people have used AI voices for presidents, current and former, to make funny sound bites and the like. I don't know exactly who would be liable in that situation. I think that is why a governmental oversight body would be so beneficial for you, because you could see where specifically the government is leaning towards trying to get these things off the internet as soon as possible, or trying to make sure that it doesn't release at all.
All right. One more question before we wrap up, just because this one came in and I think it's an excellent one from Svetlana. She writes, in your recommendation, should the regulator that you're proposing be a national regulator, an international regulator?
Federal. There's two international relations former international relations majors on the consulting team. And we've seen time and time again that international regulators tend to be toothless. And what they say in DC or Belgium is not going to stop technological development in Beijing. Local level regulators are not going to be equipped resource-wise to handle AI. So at the federal level is the perfect, or not perfect, but is the best scale.
Absolutely. Just adding to that, as I mentioned before, international laws are much stricter in general. The EU is taking a much more detailed look at your company, and America is more supportive of the business model and more capitalistic, I would say, than the rest of the world. So definitely federal review is what you want.
All right. One more question in from the chat, and apologies. I didn't know that that Peter, I didn't know what Peter's role was still as one of the judges, or when Svetlana came in, if he wasn't a judge anymore, but I think this is a great question that's worth asking. Peter asks the group, what would the cost implications be for hiring this ethics group?
Sure, that was our third option, and I did look through some of Microsoft's recent Fine, I'm sorry, the ethics group, do you mean us or Microsoft's in-house team?
Yeah, the latter.
Okay, so I did look
I
through
would
some
assume.
of Microsoft's press releases and what we had out there, and I was unable to find the salary of the pre-existing team. I do know that machine learning specialists are commanding seven-figure salaries at the moment, which is obviously a significant cost even for a many billion-dollar company like Microsoft. But I do believe that ethicists in general are getting paid less. So the total cost of reinstituting a team like that may be relatively reasonable for the potential benefits. I'm thinking somewhere below 10 million to have an effective dozen-person team with the proper experience.
All right. I think that gets us through the 20 minutes. Did any of the other board members have any other questions for the consultants?
I had one very quick follow-up question and around some of the recommendations that you made, and who do you feel in our organization should actually be driving some of the recommendations that you made? So where do you think that should live within the structure of our current organization?
I believe it should be at the very top with your CEO, Sam Altman. This is a huge problem with your company, and you need to face it directly, straight on. So yes, I think this is the responsibility of the highest seat in your company, and that will have a trickle-down effect of each member of the team taking greater responsibility to mitigate risk.
All right. We'll go ahead and take off our board of directors hat at this time and put on our judges hats again. We have ended the simulation. You all can breathe a huge sigh of relief, which I will, once you are done sighing, I will comfort you with the fact of knowing that I think I speak for the entire panel when I note that you all did an excellent job. Really terrific work. I've been involved in IBEC in various capacities as a judge, as a well-wisher, as a coach. And this is I can tell you, this is unequivocally a very strong presentation on a very difficult piece of subject matter. I mean, I think probably your greatest achievement was just identifying the most important business ethics issue we probably have going on right now in terms of the future impacts of what this is going to have, and the fact that these are ethical, legal, financial issues that are going to reverberate throughout the generations. And so the fact that you were able to identify this as an important case to talk about, and to talk about it so effectively with such excellent research that you brought to bear, is really a credit to all of you. So congratulations for that. I think what I really enjoyed about the presentation was how well organized it was. I think you guys did a very nice job right up front of walking us through the main points of your presentation, the main issues that we were going to go over. You did a nice job of kind of setting the table of what to expect for the rest of the presentation, which is always what we want to see, separating legal, financial, and ethical, and sort of guiding us as to where we are with that, with the way that your graphic was set up. So we could all see visually, okay, we're on the financial side. Okay, we're on the ethical side. That was very, very helpful. It kept things organized. It kept things easier to understand. The only thing that I might recommend in the beginning of the presentation that I think would have made it even more effective is, in addition to laying out the issue and the problem in the beginning of your presentation, it would also be effective for us as the board to know what your solution is at the beginning of the presentation. And, give us the problem, give us the solution. Obviously, you're not going to break down the solution in meticulous detail the way you did at the end of the presentation, but you at least want to kind of give us a taste of what we're going to expect up front, so that we can kind of digest it and be able to perceive the whole problem and solution within the whole context of your presentation. as that would make our life a lot easier. Now, in terms of organization, the other thing that would have been really good to see is when you're talking about legal and financial, particularly legal and financial, but really legal, financial, and ethical as well. Those parts of the presentation did a really nice job of summarizing the legal and the financial and the ethical issues that our company is confronting. And you definitely want to do that. And I think you did a pretty terrific job at that. But I think what separates the 9 out of 10 presentations from the 10 out of 10 presentations is not just summarizing those issues in the abstract, but specifically demonstrating how your solution is satisfactory on legal, financial, and ethical grounds. So you gave us this really well thought out 4-part, 5-part solution. It would have been useful maybe during the beginning, during the middle part of your presentation, or maybe towards the end, to specifically articulate for us how your solution is going to be satisfactory on legal grounds. Demonstrate to us that your solution is not going to get us in legal trouble. Demonstrate to us that your solution is satisfactory on financial grounds. Demonstrate to us at least that if we adopt your reforms, we're not going to bankrupt the company. And even better, prove to us that your solutions, if we implement them, will actually serve to make our company more profitable. And then along the way, also be able to demonstrate that your solution is going to be ethically satisfactory. And I think you did that to some extent because your solution was sort of tied into the ethics section of your presentation. But it would have been useful for you to, say, even if perhaps it's self-evident, this solution is financially satisfactory because we're a multi-billion-dollar company. We can afford to adopt these reforms. And frankly, we can't afford not to adopt these reforms, because if we don't adopt these reforms, we're going to destroy the value of this company. That's what we need to know. Like, we need to, you need to be able to demonstrate to the board that it's in our, not only what the issues are in terms of legal and financial, but that it's specifically in our legal and financial interests to adopt your reforms. And I think that's what separates the 9 out of 10 presentation from the 10 out of 10 presentation. I think on the legal side, it would have been useful to have a little bit more legal discussion. And maybe this is just me like looking at it through a lawyer's perspective, right? If your only tool is a hammer, all your problems look like nails. There was some mention during the presentation, and I'm going to be like, butchering what you said and perhaps, unfairly paraphrasing it. But I heard mentioned some reference to the idea that like these legal problems aren't that big of a deal or are not a huge problem because there are things that our competitors are also experiencing. And I can tell you as a lawyer, these are very big legal problems. These copyright issues are a big, big deal. If a court were to decide that all of the training data that OpenAI uses to create its AI constitutes copyright infringement, all we need is one federal court to say that, and the damages would be incalculable. Statutory damages, you're talking about what could be up to $100,000 of damage per act of infringement, multiplied by every single piece of item on the internet that we use to train our AI. You're talking about quadrillions of dollars in potential damages for copyright infringement. It would bankrupt this company and every other company there's not enough money in the world that would calculate the damages. And the privacy concerns, like we're just all kind of putting all of our thoughts and feelings into OpenAI every day, and it's controlling all that data and it's holding all that data. That's a huge privacy concern. That's certainly freaking out the EU because they're waving that GDPR flag like crazy. These are big deals. And I'm not saying you didn't give them short shrift, but I'm saying it warranted a much more detailed discussion to really kind of make clear this is something that we need to make sure we address by adopting the terrific reforms that you discussed at the end of your presentation. So those are some of the things that I have. I'd love to hear from the judges as well.
I'm happy to go next. So thank you again for the presentation. I think it was really well done on a lot of levels. I think you used your time effectively. I think, super important that a topic as sensitive as this be as conversational and friendly as possible. And I think you did a good job not setting it up and positioning yourselves in an adversarial way. which is so important to be able to convince a board that this is really, your recommendations are good recommendations. I like the options that you recommended, and I'll say one of the key things that I always look for in these presentations is how well you speak to some of the key issues, and you spoke directly to things like the mission and the charter. You tied that back in a number of, I believe it was at least a couple of times through the presentation, which was really, I thought was really excellent. Improvements. Overall, I agree with Ryan that I thought it was well done. I think, one of the questions that I had asked was about the financial impact, and so being able to have a little bit more detail as much as possible. I realize some of this is, we're in the context of a presentation to the board. Some of it is sort of theoretical, but we're also asking, we as a board, we would be looking for some concrete details to make that evaluation, whether, how this is going to have an overall impact on the business. So the timeline associated with it, or specific other cost impacts. So what those financial implications, I think, would just help be able to sell what you're proposing in a little more detail. Something like the impacts of that last government regulatory recommendation that you made. It's definitely an interesting one. Very hard to assess the cost impact of what something like that would be. But again, I think being able to maybe frame that in a little more detail would just add that much more level of polish. So, but very, very, very good job overall, and congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Svetlina, you want to go next?
Yeah. I too wanted to chime in about how wonderful presentation you did on such a timely topic. In my current job, I just had to write a company-wide communication last month, just specifically on that, and it's been integrated left and right.
Apologies, Svetlina. Could you speak up just a little bit?
Yeah. Not sure why. Perhaps it's because in my company we use Microsoft, and right now I'm on Zoom, which is not fully approved. But what I was mentioning is I wanted to thank you for the hard work you did, and clearly you were very prepared on the topic. It's a very timely topic, and I was mentioning that last month in my own job, I had to write a company-wide communication specifically on ChatGPT, and it's used company-wide because it is spread everywhere. Something that I just was thinking on a board level and thinking about the presentations that I've seen on the executive level is they usually like sort of financial data to hide in when choices are made. And I like that you included some of that at the beginning. It would have been nice to tie it back towards the end, but it wasn't necessarily crucial. I thought that you were very prepared to answer questions and support points you offered. The other thing that I thought it could be something addressed within the ethical issues you covered. A lot was discussed on biases, but I believe privacy is another big one that should have been addressed. That is not. It is that I feel we forget about it because so many companies use our data left and right. But it is with GDPR, with everything else that's happening, and all the regulatory bodies that are working on data privacy laws. That is one that is not just regulatory, but around compliance, but it's certainly unethical. How much information is in ChatGPT or AI? Overall, thank you so much for all the hard work you did. That was great.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Well, we really appreciate you all taking part in this competition and doing the excellent work you did. It's knowing that if you all are emblematic of what the next generation of business looks like, I have a great deal of optimism for the next generation of business, and that's and I hope that you all continue in ethics, and make sure it continues to guide whatever you do when you enter the workforce and beyond, because you all are quite sharp at this, and we've really enjoyed spending some time with you the last hour and a half.